The family had always treated Thanksgiving like a sacred tradition, the one day nothing ever changed. Same house, same dishes, same jokes, same arguments. That kind of predictable routine that makes people feel safe. But that year, nothing about Thanksgiving was safe. It started the moment the Harrisons sat down for dinner. The house was warm and bright, laughter filling the rooms, the smell of rosemary turkey drifting through every doorway. Everything felt familiar, comforting, until the doorbell rang. Everyone went silent. They weren't expecting anyone. Mr. Harrison got up from the table, muttering something about kids selling cookies. But when he opened the door, the family heard his voice shift from annoyance to excitement. "Is that really you? After all these years?" A man stepped inside. Tall, clean-cut, dressed in a dark coat that still glistened with cold November air. He wasn't smiling, but his eyes seemed to watch everything at once. He carried himself with the ease of someone who belonged there. But no one recognized him. Except, apparently, everyone did. At least that's what they claimed. Mrs. Harrison gasped, hand over her heart. "My goodness, we thought you'd never come back." The cousins rushed over, greeting him the way someone might greet an uncle returning from overseas. One even hugged him. Someone else slapped his back and joked about old times. But none of them had ever mentioned this man before. Not once. Only one person in that room, Emily, the college-aged niece, felt the dread immediately. She watched silently from the table, fork frozen halfway to her mouth. She had never seen that man in her life. And yet, everyone else acted like he'd grown up with them. He walked into the dining room like he'd been there every Thanksgiving since childhood. He took the empty seat right beside Emily as though it had been waiting for him. No one questioned it. They just slid over, made room, and carried on. But Emily couldn't look away from him. His hands were too still. His breathing too quiet. And the way he watched her, the only one who hadn't welcomed him, felt intentional. The stranger leaned slightly toward her. "You've grown," he said softly. Emily recoiled. "Sorry, do I know you?" The room fell silent, and she realized instantly she had broken an unspoken rule. Every head at the table turned to her in confusion. Mrs. Harrison frowned. "Emily, honey, don't be rude. Of course you know him. Don't you remember the summers at the lake house?" "There was no lake house," Emily said. Her voice trembled, but she held her ground. "We've never had one." Her aunt's expression went flat and strange, like she was trying to remember something someone else had told her. Then she smiled again too quickly. "Of course we did. You must be tired from school." The stranger didn't look away from her. His stare wasn't angry. It wasn't confused. It was expectant. Dinner continued, awkward at first, then louder as the family slipped back into their usual rhythm. But something felt off. Their laughter sounded forced, their stories mismatched, like they were all reading from a script they only half remembered. The stranger barely ate. He kept one hand on the table, fingers tapping slowly, almost like counting. He chimed into conversations with memories Emily had never heard before, memories no one had mentioned in her entire life. And yet everyone nodded along. Everyone except her. At one point Mr. Harrison raised a toast. "To family we've missed, and family we will never lose again." Everyone lifted their glasses. The stranger lifted nothing, only watching Emily. The air grew heavier, colder. The lights dimmed slightly, though the family didn't seem to notice. Emily's heart pounded. She could feel eyes on her every time she looked away. After dinner, people drifted off to the living room for pie and coffee. The stranger stayed at the dining table, sitting perfectly still as though waiting for something. Emily tried to stay near her cousin, but her aunt insisted she help gather plates. Soon she was back in the dining room, alone with him. He spoke before she could leave. "They won't remember you asking questions," he said calmly. "They never do." Emily froze. "Who are you?" He tilted his head slightly, like the question didn't make sense. "I'm who they needed me to be," he replied. "Who they chose to remember." His hand stopped tapping. The room felt suddenly, suffocatingly quiet. "You're the only one who sees the gaps," he said. "The only one still outside." She backed away. "Outside of what?" He smiled then, a slow, unnatural stretch of the mouth that didn't match his eyes. "They invited me in," he whispered. "Just like they will invite you." Emily ran. She found her parents in the living room, laughing, acting like everything was normal. She tried to tell them the man wasn't who he said he was. That he didn't belong there. That something was wrong. They just stared at her, confused, embarrassed. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder. "Emily, we're so glad he came back. We've missed him for so many years." "He isn't real," she screamed. The laughter stopped. The room fell silent. Her mother's eyes darkened slightly. Her expression hardened in a way Emily had never seen before. "Don't say that," her mother whispered sharply. "Not about family." Emily stepped back. Something was changing in their faces, not anger, not sadness, something colder. Like they were slipping into the same strange fog that kept them loyal to the stranger. A moment later, they all turned toward the dining room, as if they heard something she didn't. The stranger stood in the doorway. No footsteps. No sound. Just suddenly there. He looked at each family member, then back at Emily. "It's time," he said softly. The family nodded. Every single one of them. Emily sprinted for the front door. She barely made it 2 steps before hands grabbed her. Her uncle, her cousin, people she had grown up trusting. They held her gently, almost lovingly, as if guiding her rather than restraining her. "It'll be okay," her aunt whispered. "You'll understand once you remember." "Remember what?" Emily sobbed. The stranger approached, placing a cold hand on her forehead. "Where you belong." Her vision blurred. Colors twisted. The house around her felt like it was coming apart at the seams. She could hear voices, her family's voices, repeating the same words over and over. "You've always been with us. You've always been here. You've always belonged." Then everything went black. When Emily opened her eyes, she was at the dining table again. A plate in front of her. A chair beside her. Her family smiling warmly as if nothing had happened. Only one seat was empty now. The stranger's. Her mother touched her shoulder. "Sweetheart, are you all right?" You spaced out for a moment. Emily looked around slowly. The family stared back, faces soft, welcoming, familiar. Every detail felt like it had always been that way. And when the doorbell rang again, Emily's face lit up with an unfamiliar joy. She stood, stepping toward the entryway as if greeting someone she'd waited years to see. And from the dining table, her cousin whispered, "I'm so glad she remembers him again." The family nodded, smiling. Because this time, Emily was one of them. People in Birch Hollow used to joke that the town only cared about 3 things: the fall harvest, Friday night football, and the annual Thanksgiving turkey hunt. It had been a tradition for nearly 60 years. Every November, a dozen men would head into the woods behind the ridge, bring back wild turkeys for the community feast, and spend the rest of the day drinking, talking, and bragging about whose bird was biggest. But last year, the tradition ended. Not officially. Not by choice. It ended because the hunters never came back the same. The trouble started with something small, something easy to ignore. Wild turkeys began turning up dead in the woods. Not shot, not hunted. Just dead. Plain. Like something took only what it needed and left the rest behind. People blamed coyotes, bobcats, whatever was hungry enough. But old-timers said the bodies looked untouched. No tearing, no bites, no tracks. Just lifeless. By the time the annual hunt rolled around, most of the town shrugged it off. The hunters went out as usual, 12 men, all longtime residents. They left before dawn with rifles on their shoulders and coolers in their trucks. Everyone expected them back by noon. Nobody expected what came next. They returned early, far too early. But not all of them. Only 8 came back. People noticed right away. 4 trucks were missing from the line of vehicles near the edge of the woods. When the hunters stepped out of the trees, they looked pale, shaken, and quiet. Men who usually joked and laughed after a hunt couldn't even meet anyone's eyes. Something had happened out there. Something none of them wanted to talk about. When the mayor asked where the others were, the group said the same thing. They split off. They wanted to check the lower creek. They'll be back soon. But their voices trembled. All 8 of them. Even the ones who normally walked around like nothing could scare them. That night, the missing 4 still hadn't returned. Search groups went out but found nothing except their abandoned tracks. No signs of struggle, no gunshots, nothing. Their footprints just stopped. By morning, their families insisted on calling for state authorities. But the police said to wait. It hadn't even been 24 hours. Maybe they got lost. Maybe they were camping. 100 excuses, none of them convincing. But the hunters knew better. They just wouldn't say it. The real story didn't come out until the second disappearance. 3 days after the hunt, one of the men who returned, Earl Whitten, vanished from his home. Earl lived alone, so no one noticed at first. But his neighbor found something disturbing early that morning. A wild turkey standing on Earl's porch. Perfectly still. Staring at the front door. There were no turkeys left in those woods. None living anyway. Yet this one looked untouched. Plain. Alive. Except Earl was gone. His truck was in the driveway. His TV was still on. A cup of coffee sat on the table, still warm. And his back door was wide open. They found footprints in the mud behind his house. Earl's boots leading into the woods. And right beside them, a second set. Bird-like. Too large. Too deep. Too wrong. The next day, another hunter disappeared. Marcus Bell. This time, his wife heard something outside around midnight, heavy footsteps circling the house. She thought it was a deer until she heard scratching along the siding, slow and deliberate, like something was testing the walls. When Marcus grabbed his rifle, the noise stopped. He looked out the window and saw a turkey standing perfectly centered on their lawn. Not moving. Not blinking. Marcus stepped outside to scare it off. His wife watched him walk into the yard. She watched him stop in front of the bird. He didn't even scream. He just dropped, collapsed like someone cut his strings. By the time she ran outside, he was gone, dragged into the woods, leaving deep grooves in the dirt, almost like claws had grabbed him. Again, the only thing left behind was a turkey. A different one. This one missing a single feather, placed right on the doorstep. By now, the surviving hunters wouldn't leave their homes. They boarded up windows, slept with guns, and kept lights on all night. But every morning, another one went missing. Always replaced by a single turkey standing somewhere near the home. Porch steps, backyard, front walkway. And always silent. The police tried posting patrols, setting traps, searching the woods. But it never mattered. The disappearances continued exactly the same way. There was one thing all the hunters agreed on. Something came out of the woods with them that day. Finally, one of the remaining men broke. His name was Travis Carter, the youngest of the group. He wasn't there for the tradition. He went for bonding with the older guys. But what he saw broke him. He confessed everything. The hunt had been normal until they reached the clearing near the lower ridge. They expected to find turkeys there. Tracks were always heavy. But this time they found something else entirely. A circle of dead turkeys, perfectly arranged around a pile of stones. Their bodies untouched. Not a mark on them. The oldest hunter, Rick Hartley, said it looked like a ritual. Something meant to send a warning. The others argued, joked, brushed it off. But then the ground inside the circle shifted. Something rose from beneath the stones. Tall, thin, covered in feathers matted with dirt. Its head bent at an unnatural angle, too long, too narrow. Eyes sunken but alert. It wasn't a bird. But it wasn't human either. It stood on two legs, talons buried in the earth, and made no sound at all. Not a screech. Not a hiss. Nothing. And that silence, Travis said, was the worst part. Rick fired at it first. The others followed. But every shot missed, even the ones that shouldn't have. The creature moved without moving. One moment it was there. The next it wasn't. Then 4 hunters screamed. For men Travis swore he saw dragged into the trees so quickly it looked impossible. The moment they were taken, the creature vanished. The remaining 8 ran. They didn't look back. Travis said the creature wasn't hunting them for food. It wasn't eating the turkeys or the men. It was replacing them. Offering one life for another. A trade. When the story spread through town, people argued whether Travis had lost his mind or if something older, something that lived in those woods long before Birch Hollow existed, had finally decided to reclaim that land. By the end of the week, all 12 hunters were gone. 12 turkeys appeared in their place. But the strangest part? Those turkeys didn't behave like turkeys. They didn't wander. They didn't flock. They stayed near town, watching, waiting, standing guard like they were claiming something. And then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they left. Walked back into the woods in a single line. Not one person tried to stop them. The town canceled the Thanksgiving hunt for good. No one has set foot past the ridge since. Not even hikers. Not even kids. And every year, around the week of Thanksgiving, people start hearing rustling at the tree line. Footsteps. Low clicking sounds. Sometimes a shadow between the trees. No one knows if the creature ever intended to stop at the hunters, or if they were simply the first offering. But every November, the same warning echoes between the houses near the woods. If you hear the turkeys return, don't go outside. Don't open the door. And whatever you do, don't hunt anything in those woods ever again. Every year, the first grade at Pine Ridge Elementary sends the kids home with some kind of Thanksgiving craft. Usually it's the same thing: handprint turkeys, paper pilgrim hats, dried macaroni glued to cardboard. Nothing anyone would think twice about. But last Thanksgiving, the Williams family received a project that didn't look like anything the school had ever sent home before. And by the end of the week, the school, the teacher, and the other parents were all pretending they knew nothing about it. It started the Monday before the holiday. 7-year-old Chloe came off the bus tightly hugging a little burlap doll about the size of her forearm. It had yarn hair, button eyes, and tiny stitched clothing made of patterned scraps. At first glance, it looked handmade. Someone had put real care into it. Her mother, Dana, assumed it was some kind of art project. A Thanksgiving doll, maybe a harvest-themed figure. Cute but odd. When she asked Chloe what it was, the girl just smiled and said, "Miss Laverne said we each got to make one. This is mine." But that wasn't quite true. Later, when Dana texted the class group chat, every other parent responded the same way. Their kids didn't bring anything home. There wasn't any Thanksgiving project. The teacher never mentioned one. One parent even said they weren't sure Miss Laverne had been at school that day at all. By dinner time, though, Dana wasn't thinking about the group chat anymore. She was thinking about the doll. Because when she walked into the living room to call everyone to the table, she heard a tiny voice whispering. Not Chloe's voice. Something smaller. Slightly muffled. The doll was sitting upright on the couch, leaning against a pillow. Its stitched smile seemed wider in the dim light. At first she thought maybe it had one of those pull-string voice boxes. Old-fashioned but possible. So she leaned in. The voice coming from it was soft, breathy, and it was repeating something she recognized. Because just 10 minutes earlier, Dana had been in the kitchen whispering to her husband about something she didn't want the kids to hear. Her sister's relapse, the one the family had been trying to hide. The doll was whispering those exact words. Word for word. She stood there frozen, listening to it quietly muttering the secret she had spoken behind a closed door. A secret only 2 adults knew. She unplugged the lamp beside it, thinking maybe it was some kind of speaker. But the doll kept whispering in the dark. When she grabbed it and flipped it over, there was no seam, no batteries, no stitches that looked opened or resewn. Just burlap and thread. That night, she tried to ask Chloe more questions about how the doll was made. But the girl seemed confused, like she didn't remember the process clearly. All she could say was, "Miss Laverne helped me." And when Dana pressed further, when she asked what exactly the teacher helped with, Chloe got upset and refused to talk about it. By Wednesday, the doll had become a fixture in the house. Chloe insisted on keeping it with her everywhere. At breakfast, in the car, in the bathroom even. Dana had tried to gently take it away more than once, but each time, Chloe reacted like she was taking a limb off her body. And every night after the house went quiet, the whispering started again. Sometimes it repeated conversations that happened hours earlier. Sometimes it recited the kids' arguments word for word. Sometimes it whispered things that nobody in the house remembered saying, but felt real anyway. Like thoughts that had never been spoken out loud. Dana's husband tried to explain it away as imagination, stress, a misheard sound. Anything normal. Anything that made sense. That was until Thanksgiving morning. Dana woke up early to start the turkey, and as she came down the stairs, she heard 2 voices in the living room. Chloe's, and something that wasn't Chloe. The doll was in her daughter's lap, pressed close to her ear. And Chloe was talking to it like it could understand her. Like it was answering. Dana paused, listening. Her daughter was telling the doll things no child should know. Things about conversations between adults from years ago. Things about people in their family who were gone. Names she should have never heard. And worst of all, she kept saying, "Miss Laverne told me you'll help me remember more." The doll whispered something in return, a low, rhythmic murmur. That was the first time Dana felt afraid of her own child. During Thanksgiving dinner, the family gathered around the table, trying to pretend everything was normal. But Chloe wouldn't put the doll down. She sat with it on her lap, one hand gripping its torso so tightly her knuckles were white. Halfway through the meal, the doll spoke again. Clearer this time. It repeated something the grandfather had said privately 2 nights earlier. Something about selling property that no one else in the family knew about. Everyone froze. The room went cold. The grandfather's face drained of color. He asked Chloe very slowly, "Who told you that?" But it wasn't Chloe who answered. The doll lifted its head. Not physically, its stitched neck didn't move, but the posture changed just enough that everyone at the table saw it. And it spoke in a voice that matched the grandfather's exactly. Dana dropped her fork. Her husband stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. The doll mimicked the grandfather's voice again, smoother this time, like it had practiced it. And the words it said next were not ones anyone at the table had ever spoken aloud. "You shouldn't lie to them anymore." The grandfather pushed back from the table and shouted at Dana to take it away, burn it, do something. But before anyone could move, the doll began whispering again, fast, overlapping itself, like hundreds of voices layered together. Every secret from every person at that table. Private affairs. hidden debts, old betrayals. Words spoken years ago in the privacy of cars, bedrooms, hospital rooms. Things no one else could know. And Chloe, she just stared ahead, unblinking. The whispering grew louder until the doll suddenly fell silent, as if someone had pressed mute. Chloe blinked, confused. She looked down at the doll, then up at everyone at the table and asked, "Why are you all looking at me like that?" She had no memory of the whispers. No memory of the voices. None of it. That night, after everyone left, Dana tried to get rid of the doll. She stuffed it into a trash bag and drove it to a dumpster behind a closed hardware store. She threw it in, tied the bag tight, and drove home shaking. But at dawn, she heard her daughter laughing upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, Chloe was sitting in bed, happily brushing the doll's yarn hair. The same doll. No rips, no dirt, no signs of travel. It had come back. Dana told her husband they needed to leave the house. Leave town. Take the kids and go somewhere far away. But she never got the chance. Because when she went to get Chloe dressed, she found her sitting cross-legged on the floor, talking to the doll again. Whispering back and forth like two people having a private conversation. Only one sentence was clear. Chloe said, "Miss Laverne says I'm doing a good job remembering." When Dana called the school in a panic, the receptionist calmly said that Pine Ridge Elementary hadn't employed a teacher named Miss Laverne in over 50 years. The last one with that name had been a young woman who mysteriously vanished in the late 1970s. A woman who used to teach first grade. A woman who once created handmade burlap dolls for her students as part of a Thanksgiving project. Right before she disappeared. The family moved out of their home 2 weeks later, leaving almost everything behind. But if you drive through that neighborhood now, around the holidays, you might see a small child sitting on a porch, holding a burlap doll with button eyes and a stitched smile, whispering secrets no child should ever know. And if you listen long enough, the doll will start whispering back. The story begins in a quiet cul-de-sac where nothing dangerous ever seemed to happen. Families knew each other, kids rode bikes until dark, and neighbors still borrowed sugar and waved from their driveways. But that year, just a week before Thanksgiving, a new family moved into the pale yellow house at the end of the street. They called themselves the Hathaways. They were polite, friendly enough, and always smiling, almost too much. People whispered that something about them felt off. They didn't blink much. They never seemed tired. And no one ever saw them bring furniture into the house. But they showed up at every community event, wearing those same calm smiles that never reached their eyes. The family at the center of what happened. Mark, his wife Elena, and their teenage daughter Chloe, were the sort of people who tried to make newcomers feel welcome. So when the Hathaways mentioned they had no Thanksgiving plans that year, Elena didn't hesitate. She invited them over, thinking it would be a kind gesture. They accepted immediately. Too immediately. Elena later said their smiles widened the second she asked, as if they'd been waiting for the invitation long before it was offered. A few days before Thanksgiving, the Hathaways stopped by again, telling the family they insisted on bringing a special dish. They said it was something meaningful from their hometown. Something honored during times of gratitude. Elena imagined a casserole or maybe a pie. But the way they said it, something about it felt rehearsed. Chloe even joked later that the family said it like they were promising a sacrifice. Thanksgiving Day came. Friends arrived, relatives filtered in, and the house filled with the usual holiday smells. Roasting turkey, baked potatoes, cinnamon rolls. Everything felt warm and normal. Until the doorbell rang. The Hathaways stood there, all three of them dressed in matching dark brown sweaters, each holding one corner of a long, covered tray. Whatever was underneath the lid was heavy enough that they carried it with both hands. They didn't speak at first. They just looked at the family with those still smiles, waiting. When Mark invited them in, they nodded in unison. Elena would later swear that as they passed, she caught the faintest scent coming from the tray, something salty, smoky, and oddly familiar. But she didn't place it then. During dinner, the Hathaways sat perfectly straight, barely touching their plates. They watched, quietly, expectantly, as everyone scooped food and passed dishes around the table. When it came time for their contribution, Mr. Hathaway gently placed the lid aside. Inside was a stew. Thick, dark, almost glossy. Chunks of meat floated just below the surface, tender and pale. A handful of herbs was sprinkled across the top, but the smell was unlike anything Elena had ever encountered. People tried being polite, praising its appearance, asking what was in it. But the Hathaways just shook their heads, smiling. "It's better if you taste it first," Mrs. Hathaway said softly. Everyone at the table stared. The Hathaways stared back. Chloe, always the brave type, was the first to scoop some onto her plate. The spoon clinked against the ceramic, and for a moment the entire room went silent. She took a small bite, chewed once, stopped. Her expression froze, not in fear but confusion. She swallowed slowly and set her fork down. "This tastes like," she began, trailing off. The adults waited for her to finish. "This tastes like the ribs from Carter's Smokehouse." The room shifted. Carter's Smokehouse was the local barbecue joint, or had been. It shut down 3 months earlier after the owner, Tom Carter, vanished. His disappearance was still the biggest mystery in town. Posters were still on telephone poles. The police still asked questions. And the flavor, everyone in town remembered it. Tom Carter's smoke rub was unmistakable. Chloe's mother stiffened. Then she tasted a small piece herself, unsure, maybe hoping her daughter was mistaken. But the second the meat hit her tongue, her face drained of color. It wasn't the flavor of the smokehouse ribs. It was exactly the flavor of Tom Carter's smokehouse ribs. That same distinct seasoning, the same melt-in-your-mouth tenderness, the same slow-smoked edge that people used to line up for. Elena felt her body go cold. She didn't say a word. Neither did anyone else. But the Hathaways smiled wider. "We hoped you'd recognize it," Mr. Hathaway said softly, folding his hands on the table. "Your town has such lovely traditions. We thought it would be respectful to honor someone important to the community." Mark's voice cracked when he finally spoke. "Where did you get this recipe?" "Oh," Mr. Hathaway said, "we didn't use a recipe." The room froze. Elena's fork slid from her hand to the plate. The Hathaways continued to smile. Their eyes were unblinking, glistening with a kind of expectant pride, as if waiting for applause. When Mark tried to stand from the table, Mr. Hathaway reached out and placed 2 fingers gently on his wrist. His touch was light, but it felt firm, unnaturally firm, like steel. "You invited us into your home," he said, voice soft but sharp. "And we brought a gift made from someone who once belonged here. Someone unclaimed, unwanted, forgotten." He tilted his head. "It's our way of giving thanks." Chloe's breath hitched. Elena pulled her daughter closer, expecting the Hathaways to rise, to attack, to reveal whatever monstrous thing they truly were. But instead they calmly picked up their utensils. Mrs. Hathaway leaned forward just slightly, eyes locked on Elena. "Tradition is important," she whispered. "We take great pride in honoring the places we move to." Then she added, "And we never waste anything." The family didn't eat. They didn't move. They barely breathed. The Hathaways finished their portions in eerie silence. Afterward, they gathered their tray, gave a polite goodbye, and walked out the front door. No threats. No violence. Just a quiet smile from each of them before they stepped into the night. That was the last time anyone on the cul-de-sac saw them. By morning, their house was empty. Not just empty, stripped. No carpets, no appliances, no fixtures. Even the electrical outlets were gone, like the house had been gutted in a single night. And on the kitchen counter, police found a single note. Written in neat handwriting were the words, "Thank you for welcoming us. Your generosity completes the harvest." The tray they'd brought was left behind. Clean. Spotless. Not a single trace of stew inside. But when investigators ran tests on it, they found something in microscopic amounts along the edges. A fragment of human tissue. Matched to Tom Carter. To this day, nobody knows who the Hathaways really were, or where they went next. But every Thanksgiving for years now, families in neighboring towns have reported unexpected visitors. Always polite, always smiling, always insisting on bringing a special dish. And every time someone goes missing afterward, people wonder the same thing. Did the new neighbors bring it? Or did they come looking for their next ingredient? The story begins with a family doing everything they could to pretend it was a normal Thanksgiving. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and the faint sharpness of pine from a freshly cut centerpiece on the dining table. But underneath all of it was something heavy, grief so thick that not even holiday scents could cover it. The Carsons were still mourning their oldest son, Daniel. He had died in a car accident 8 days before the holiday. A closed casket funeral, a quiet burial, and a house that hadn't heard real laughter since. His mother tried her best to keep things from falling apart, but even she couldn't hide the way her eyes kept drifting toward the empty chair at the end of the table. Thanksgiving wasn't supposed to happen that year. But grief does strange things to people. It makes them cling to tradition because letting it go feels like admitting the person is gone forever. They sat down, just 4 of them now, trying to be grateful for anything at all. And then someone knocked on the front door. At first, nobody moved. The family lived on a quiet rural road. They weren't expecting guests. The knock sounded again, slow, deliberate, almost uncertain. Mr. Carson finally pushed back his chair and walked to the foyer. He opened the door only a few inches at first, unsure who would be out on a cold November evening. But then he froze. Standing on the porch, wearing the same green jacket they had buried him in, was Daniel. His hair was mussed. His lips were pale. His eyes were tired, sunken, almost bruised looking, but unmistakably alive. It took several seconds for the shock to register. Mr. Carson's breath tore out of his throat like something sharp had cut it. He threw the door open and yelled for his wife, for his other children. Everyone came running. What followed was a chaos of crying, hugging, stumbling, disbelief. Daniel barely spoke as they embraced him. He just whispered, "I'm home." His voice sounded strained, as if unused for a long time. The family dragged him inside, bombarding him with questions. Where had he been? Was he hurt? Did he remember the accident? Did he need a doctor? But Daniel kept giving the same answer. "I'm fine. I just want to be with you." He avoided the overhead lights, wincing whenever someone reached for a switch. He asked them to leave the curtains closed. His skin looked sensitive, almost irritated by even the dim kitchen glow. His mother blamed shock. His father blamed trauma. They told themselves people returning from the dead didn't have to make sense. They sat him at the table, filling his plate. Daniel tried to eat, but every bite seemed to take effort, chewing too slow, swallowing too carefully. He said the food tasted different, but he forced it down anyway to make his mother smile. The younger siblings asked him questions gently, afraid their voices might break him. The little sister asked how he found his way home. Daniel hesitated before answering. "I just remembered the path," he said softly. "It was dark, but I kept walking until the lights from the house showed me where to go." His father asked if someone had hurt him, or if he had been taken somewhere after the accident. Daniel shook his head quickly. "No, nobody hurt me." He looked down, voice dropping. "I don't want to talk about that place." That place. The family exchanged uneasy glances. But they didn't push. If their son had somehow escaped some horrific ordeal, they'd let him reveal it in his own time. Still, something felt wrong. He barely blinked. He didn't seem to breathe like a normal person. His chest rose only slightly, too slowly. And despite the warm house and thick jacket, his skin felt cold when his mother touched his cheek. Not just cold from outside air, cold like something that had been somewhere far away from life. After dinner, Daniel said he was tired. He asked if he could sleep in his old room. His mother nearly cried hearing that request. She tucked him in like he was a little boy again, brushing his hair back, promising him he was safe now. Daniel didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on the dark corner of the room. "Mom," he whispered, "please don't turn the hallway light on tonight." She asked why, but he only repeated the request. They left him in the dark. Around midnight, the parents woke to their youngest daughter screaming downstairs. They raced to the kitchen and found her standing near the fridge with her hands shaking violently. She said Daniel had been staring at her from the doorway. Not saying anything, just standing there watching her drink water. When she asked if he needed something, he stepped backward into the dark hall without a sound. Mr. Carson tried to calm her, insisting she had imagined it. But the look on her face said she knew exactly what she saw. They checked Daniel's room. He was lying in the same position as before, eyes closed. But something wasn't right about how still he was. His mother leaned close. "Daniel?" His eyelids slid open immediately. No groggy blinking. No confusion. Just open, like he hadn't been sleeping at all. He sat up too quickly, pushing past them, insisting he needed fresh air. He walked outside barefoot, unfazed by the freezing wind. The family followed, begging him to come back in. Daniel stood in the yard, staring toward the tree line, expression blank. Finally his father said what everyone else was too afraid to ask. "Son, were you really buried?" Daniel turned his head slowly, as if the question physically hurt him. "I woke up in the dark," he said softly. "Wood above me. Dirt pressing down. I heard voices too far away, and I tried to scream but I couldn't move. It felt like something was holding me still." His mother covered her mouth in horror. Daniel continued, voice trembling. "Then I felt nails, not mine, pushing out from the inside of the coffin. Like something wanted to open it." His father whispered, "What opened it, Daniel?" Daniel swallowed hard. "I don't know. I didn't see it. I just know, when it pulled me out, I wasn't alone." He stared at the trees again. His entire body stiffened. "They followed me," he whispered. "They didn't like the light. That's why I stayed in the dark all night. They don't want me to be here." The family backed away slowly. A moment later, branches snapped in the treeline. The sound was too heavy, too deliberate, like something huge was shifting just beyond sight. Daniel stepped backward toward the house, but his feet dragged unnaturally, as if something else had hold of him. His mother screamed his name. Daniel looked over his shoulder at them and his voice broke completely. "I wasn't supposed to leave." A shape moved between the trees, tall, twisting, impossible to describe except for one clear detail. It had hands. Too many hands. They reached outward, stretching toward the yard like shadows given weight. Daniel stumbled toward his family, but his body jerked violently, pulled by something unseen. His father grabbed him, but the moment their hands touched, Daniel's skin felt like ice burning with frost. A force yanked him backward. With one last look, wide, desperate, apologetic, Daniel was ripped into the darkness. The treeline snapped shut. The forest went silent. The family never saw him again. But every Thanksgiving since then, at the exact hour he returned, they hear it. A soft knock on the front door. Slow, deliberate, almost uncertain. And no one is brave enough to answer. Thanksgiving gatherings at Aunt Marlene's house were strange long before anyone realized just how strange. The family only went there once every 7 years. No more, no less. And nobody could ever remember why. Whenever someone asked, Aunt Marlene would just give the same answer. Calm, polite, and oddly rehearsed. Some traditions are older than the people who follow them. But when the 7th year came around again, something felt different. People whispered more, asked questions they normally avoided. And this time, the oldest cousin, the one who was always curious enough to dig, decided he wasn't letting the night pass without learning the truth. He noticed it the moment he stepped through the door. The house didn't smell like food. It smelled like the earth, wet soil, cold stone, and something metallic beneath it all. The blinds were shut. The heat was turned high enough that everyone felt uncomfortable, like the walls were sweating. Yet Aunt Marlene greeted each relative with a bright smile and a tight hug, insisting everything was exactly as it should be. Dinner was set for 9 o'clock, unusually late, which only made everyone more uneasy. And the cousin couldn't ignore the way the adults exchanged glances every time the old grandfather clock chimed. He asked his mother why they only came here every 7 years. She told him to drop it. He asked his uncle. He said he didn't remember. He asked his grandmother. She whispered, "It keeps things quiet, it keeps things still." Nobody explained what that meant. But as the night dragged on, the cousin noticed things, small things that didn't fit. The house had new locks on the basement door. Not on the outside of the door, but the inside. The windows in the hallway were boarded from the inside as well. And throughout the living room were small jars of something black and thick, hidden behind furniture and underneath tables. Every time he lifted one, Aunt Marlene appeared behind him like she'd been standing there for minutes. "Don't touch those," she said softly. And then, a moment later, sternly, "Ever." Dinner finally began long after the sun disappeared. The family sat at a long wooden table, candles burning low, shadows climbing the walls. But there was almost no food. Just a turkey so dry it looked mummified. Vegetables that clearly came from cans. Gravy that looked more like water than anything edible. Yet nobody complained. Nobody asked questions. Nobody took more than a few bites. Halfway through the meal, the ground trembled. A subtle vibration, quiet but unmistakable. Several people froze. One of the babies in the family began to cry. Aunt Marlene put down her fork and calmly stood. "It's early," she murmured. Then louder to the family. "Everyone stay in your seats." The cousin's heart raced. He could feel the vibration move under the house like something alive was shifting. Like something was waking up. His mother squeezed his hand under the table. Her face was pale. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "No matter what happens, do not leave this room." Then the basement door creaked. Everyone heard it, every hinge stretching, every lock straining. Aunt Marlene moved faster than someone her age should. She grabbed a ring of keys from her apron pocket and rushed toward the sound. The cousin turned to his older brother, whose expression was as confused as his. "What is down there?" he whispered. His brother swallowed. "Something," he said. "Someone." He paused. "No, not someone." The trembling grew stronger. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The table shook. Glass cracked in the kitchen. Plates rattled. Aunt Marlene reached the basement door just as the lowest lock popped open on its own. She forced the keys into the metal, desperately relocking it, whispering under her breath like a prayer. But something on the other side slammed into the wood, hard. Everyone screamed. The baby wailed. The candles flickered violently. Aunt Marlene shouted, "Everyone hold hands. Right now." No one questioned her. They obeyed instantly. The cousin felt his mother grab his hand on one side and his grandmother on the other. The basement door shook again. A deep, dragging sound echoed from below the floorboards, like long nails scraping through earth. Aunt Marlene shouted at the family, "Do not break the circle. It will smell weakness." The cousin felt something move beneath him, something that traced the perimeter of the room from under the floor, as if it were sniffing, listening, searching. Then all at once the vibration stopped. The house fell completely silent. Everyone held their breath. Seconds passed, then minutes. The candles steadied. No more scraping, no more shaking. Aunt Marlene exhaled slowly and nodded to the family. "You can let go now." One of the uncles spoke first. "You shouldn't have. Is it finished?" Aunt Marlene turned, her expression sharp. "Finished? It never finishes," she said. "That thing was sealed under this house long before any of us were born. The deal was made long before our names were written. Every 7 years we gather, not to celebrate but to reinforce the binding." The cousin's voice trembled. "What is it?" Her eyes softened, not with pity but with something closer to exhaustion. Something that remembers when this land was not ours. Something that hates what we built on top of it. And every 7 years we remind it that it cannot come up. The oldest relative at the table spoke, his voice shaking. "And if we ever stop coming?" Aunt Marlene looked toward the basement door. "It will rise," she whispered. "And it will take back everything it lost." Nobody touched the rest of the food. Nobody asked anything else. The family stayed awake until dawn, waiting for the sun like prisoners hoping for morning. And when the first light touched the windows, Aunt Marlene finally allowed them to leave. The cousin was the last one out. As he stepped through the doorway, he looked back, and for the first time, noticed something carved deep into the wooden frame above the front door. 7 tally marks, crossed out, and a fresh set beginning underneath. Aunt Marlene followed his gaze. "Next time," she said softly, "you'll help us lock it down." He shook his head, terrified. "Aunt Marlene, I don't want to come back." She gave a tired, sympathetic smile. "You will," she said. "Families don't choose tradition. Tradition chooses the family." Behind her, the basement door gave one final, distant thud. A quiet reminder that 7 years would pass, whether they were ready or not. It started the night before Thanksgiving in a quiet neighborhood where nothing ever happened. The kind of place where people still waved to their mailman and kids left their bikes in driveways without worrying about them being stolen. But that year something was off. Several families had reported seeing a man wandering the streets after dark, tall, thin, dressed in layers of dirty clothes, and moving with an odd, stiff sway, like he was forcing himself to imitate how a person walks. People assumed he was just another drifter passing through for the holidays. Rebecca's family was one of the few planning a large Thanksgiving dinner that year. Her parents always kept an open-door policy, saying no one should be alone on Thanksgiving, and they genuinely meant it. It was common for them to invite co-workers, neighbors, even the postal carrier if they heard he didn't have plans. So when the wandering man appeared at the end of their driveway on Thanksgiving night, frozen in place like he was deciding whether to approach, Rebecca's mother didn't hesitate. She stepped outside with a plate of food before he could even speak. The man didn't look at her at first. His head twitched slightly like he was listening to something far away. Then he slowly turned toward her, revealing a face that didn't quite match his posture. Skin stretched too tightly, eyes too wide and too wet, as if he hadn't blinked enough times in his entire life. But he didn't speak. He just accepted the plate with both hands and lowered his head. Rebecca's mother assumed he was shy or mentally unwell. She said a soft, "Happy Thanksgiving," then returned inside. Her family didn't think about him for the rest of the night. But he thought about them. They knew that when he came back, just after midnight the next night, long after the house had gone quiet, Rebecca heard something brushing along the siding outside her bedroom window. Not tapping, dragging. A slow, deliberate scrape, like someone running their fingernails across the wooden panels. She got up, walked to the window and saw nothing except the dark yard. But before she stepped away, a voice rose from directly below her window. "May I return the kindness?" She froze. It was the same man's voice, but not quite human. Something about it stuttered, like it had been pieced together from different recordings. Rebecca yelled for her father. By the time he reached the front door, the man had already placed something on the porch. A large burlap sack. And he was standing at the end of the driveway again just like the night before, except this time he was perfectly still, not shivering, not blinking, not breathing. Her father approached cautiously. "Sir, you need to leave," he warned. The man didn't move. Her father nudged the sack with his foot. Something inside shifted. When he recoiled, the man finally spoke again, but the voice wasn't his. It was an exact mimic of Rebecca's mother's Thanksgiving greeting. "Happy Thanksgiving." Then, as if a switch flipped, his posture loosened and he walked away, not fast, not slow, just wrong. A stiff, unnatural glide that made her father back away in fear. They brought the sack inside only because the weather was cold and they wanted to see if it contained something alive and suffering, an injured animal maybe. But the moment they untied the rope, a smell leaked out. Not rot. Not blood. Something sterile and metallic, like hospital chemicals soaked in mud. Inside were feathers. Raw, wet feathers. And beneath them, something else. A human ear. Small. Child-sized. Rebecca screamed. Her father immediately called the police. But the police never found the man. They patrolled the neighborhood, checked empty sheds, even combed through the woods behind the cul-de-sac. Nothing. The officers took the sack and promised to send it to the lab, but later that night, one of them returned to the door looking pale. He asked if anyone in the family had spoken to the man face to face. Rebecca's mother said she had. The officer swallowed hard, then asked her to describe his eyes. She said, "White. What? Too bright." The officer nodded like he wasn't surprised. And then he told them something they hadn't expected to hear. There'd been sightings of a man like that in 3 other towns. Always before a holiday. He approaches families who leave food outside. Acts confused or lost or harmless. But every time he disappears, something else disappears too. Pets. Small farm animals. In one case, a child. Rebecca's parents felt sick. The officer leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Whatever he is, it's not someone living on the streets. He's choosing Thanksgiving for a reason." That night, Rebecca didn't sleep. She listened to every creak and groan the house made. Every gust of wind scraping branches against the siding. At about 3 in the morning, she heard something outside again. A faint sound. Not dragging this time. Knocking. 3 soft knocks. Not on the door. On her window. She pulled the blanket to her chin, trying not to breathe too loudly. The knocking came again, only gentler this time, like someone testing the boundary between being polite and demanding entry. Then came the voice. But it wasn't the man's voice anymore. It was Rebecca's voice. Perfectly identical. "May I return the kindness?" She ran to her parents' room in tears. Her father called the police again, but by the time they checked the yard, there were only footprints. Far too long, far too narrow, spaced far too widely to belong to any human. The prints ended abruptly in the middle of the yard, as if the creature had simply lifted off the ground and disappeared. For the next few days, the family stayed with relatives across town. And that should have been the end of it. But 2 mornings later, when Rebecca's father returned home to gather clothes, something was waiting on the porch. A single feather. What? Metallic smelling. Like the ones in the sack. Next to it was a note written in shaking, unfamiliar handwriting. "Kindness received. Kindness returned. The rest will come." Rebecca's family moved out before Christmas. The new owners know nothing of what happened. But neighbors still say they see the tall, thin man walking the street on cold nights, head twitching, body jerking with that stiff, unnatural rhythm. He never takes anything. He never asks for food. He only pauses in front of one house, the house where Rebecca used to live. And sometimes, just sometimes, he leaves a feather on the porch. Always wet. Always fresh. Always the same metallic smell. And every Thanksgiving since then, every pet in that neighborhood goes missing. No one opens their door at night anymore. Because whatever that man truly is, he only shows kindness once.